All right, let's get right into it. When we hear the word collapse, we usually think of something big, loud, and obvious, right? A very sudden, very visible breakdown. But today, we're going to look at a totally different kind of collapse, one that's quiet, internal, and often happens long before anyone else has a clue. We're going to talk about something called identity collapse.
So let's start with this question, because it's really the heart of the matter. What if the biggest, most important collapses aren't loud explosions at all? What if they're more like a slow, silent wearing away of who you are? This is the core idea we're going to unpack, and it might just make you rethink what it means to be at a breaking point.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to draw a line in the sand between two different things. Over here, you've got functional collapse. That's the one we all know. It's visible, it's sudden, you just can't do the thing anymore. But then there's identity collapse, and this one is sneaky. It's invisible, it's gradual, and it is so confusing because it's not about losing your ability to function, it's about losing your ability to trust yourself.
And that really is the key definition right there. Identity collapse is not the moment a person stops doing their job or meeting their responsibilities. In fact, on the outside, they can look completely fine, even successful. The collapse has already happened on the inside. It's that moment they stop trusting their own judgment, their own instincts, their own view of reality.
So, how in the world does this even start?
Well, it begins with this really subtle shift. A point where your confidence stops being this solid thing you own and instead becomes conditional. That firm ground of self-belief you used to stand on? Yeah, it starts to get real thin. Now this is a fascinating psychological twist. Normally, when you succeed, you feel more confident, right? It builds you up. But when this erosion is happening, success doesn't do that anymore. It doesn't actually reinforce your self-trust. Instead, all it does is buy you a little time. It just postpones the doubt for a day or two before that nagging voice creeps right back in.
And you can see how this whole process works. It's really like a death by 1,000 cuts. Small, minor critiques start to feel like these huge personal attacks. Your confidence, which used to come from inside, is now completely dependent on what other people think. But when you're constantly being watched and judged, well, feeling stable becomes pretty much impossible.
So as that need for other people's approval gets stronger and stronger, all that pressure starts to turn inward. And that leads us to our next stage, the heavy weight of self-blame. This is the point where all that stress from the outside starts to become real internal damage.
And to really understand that damage, we have to talk about the difference between guilt and shame. They are not the same thing. Guilt is about an action. It's, I did something bad. You can fix that. But shame is about your identity. It's that deep, sinking feeling of, I am bad. The problem isn't what you did, it's who you are. And that is so much more destructive.
So here's what happens. Your own mind starts to turn on you. It begins to misinterpret its own signals. You know, those totally normal human reactions to intense pressure, like being tired, feeling anxious. Your brain stops seeing them as normal. Instead, it sees them as proof. Proof that you're inadequate. Proof that you're weak. Proof that you just can't cut it.
And sitting just underneath that shame, there can be something even deeper going on called moral injury. Now, this isn't about one big, dramatic moment of compromise. It's this quiet, creeping sense of self-betrayal. It builds up from making thousands of tiny little choices that go against what you believe in, all because of the pressure you're under. And it often doesn't show up as anger. It shows up as numbness, like your self-respect has just been slowly ground down.
All of this leads to what is maybe the most confusing and maddening part of the whole experience. We're going to call it the competence paradox. It's that profound, unshakable feeling that you're becoming less capable, even when there is zero objective evidence to prove it.
And the person going through this is asking themselves this very question, probably every single day. My work is fine, my results are good, so why does everything feel so hard? Why does my confidence feel like it's made of paper-thin glass? It is an incredibly disorienting way to feel.
And here is the answer. The problem isn't your skill. It's not about you. It is about the context you're in. Because when the rules are always changing, when feedback is vague and the standards are unclear, it's impossible to ever really feel competent. And you have to remember this. Doubt doesn't need failure to grow. It thrives in ambiguity.
And what's so wild is that your own personal strength, like having really high standards for yourself, can actually make this whole collapse happen faster. Because under all that scrutiny, what does a high achiever do?
They raise their own internal standards even higher. They push themselves harder, rest less, and magnify every tiny error. This creates this dangerous feedback loop that just burns through their resources and actually speeds up the very thing they're trying so hard to prevent.
Eventually, something has to give. You just can't sustain that forever. And this brings us to the quiet breaking point. But it is absolutely critical to reframe this moment. It's not a failure. It is a necessary turning point. It's the moment when a natural human limit is finally reached. So what does that breaking point actually feel like from the inside? Well, it's when you really can't trust your own perceptions anymore. It's when a totally neutral comment feels like a threat. It's when it feels so much safer to just stay silent than to speak your mind. And you stop making careful choices. You're just enduring, just running on fumes.
And this quote from the source material, man, it says everything. The mind had not failed, it had reached its limit. Let that sink in. This isn't a glitch, it's not a malfunction, it's a design feature. It's the logical, predictable result of pushing any system too far for too long. But, and this is probably the most important part of this whole thing, that moment of collapse, that breaking point, it's not the end. It really isn't. In a lot of ways, it's the opposite. It is a mandatory stop that forces you, finally, to change direction.
And that's the final thought I really want to leave you with. Identity collapse is that exact moment when the old story you were living just becomes completely unsustainable. It's the point where a new one simply has to be written. So the question isn't whether the story is over. The question is, what will the new story be?